Because the whole point of being here is to fix yourself and have the experience and live 80 years here on the planet Earth and say, well, I came here to have an experience and I did the best I could. And I think I'm a better soul now that I'm going back into the collective. That, my friends, is the whole meaning of life. You come here as a soul, you have an experience, you die, you move on, you go back to the collective, and then you have another experience. And we've had millions and trillions of them. And the idea is to keep perfecting. It's a bit like taking a piece of marble out of the quarry, and you start off with, hacking away and creating, very angular shapes. But by a million years later, you've created a masterpiece like Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo. It takes time to shape the soul.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I'm your humble servant and Sifu, Daoist Master San Qing. And I've been looking forward to this conversation. I want to welcome to the podcast today Freddy Silva. And I want to talk to him about many things, but he is basically an ancient civilization, sommelier of all things created for a conscious awareness that there's something greater than God, and it could be you. I want to welcome you to the podcast, my dear friend.
Good morning, Sam.
I believe you have a sense of humor, so you haven't hung up on me yet. So,
well, given that your background, I think we share the same sense of sarcasm, which is the polite way of saying, I'm a person that never really mastered diplomacy.
Right. It's this is a fascinating time that we're in, and I'm personally could be considered a little long on the tooth in relation to my clicks and this conscious path of awareness. And I believe you also have many, many years of enlightenment that you can pass on to, I don't know, the next generation of people that don't give a shit, which happens to be right now. Which is great,
And you know what? It's nothing new. I mean, I started the last lecture with a quote. I said, I didn't tell the people where the quote was coming from. I said, it's a quote between two old codgers sitting in a taverna somewhere. And they was complaining about, look at the youth of today. They have no respect. The people don't give a damn about books. They don't want to read. They want simple answers to everything. There's no sort of respect for law and order, and the ideas of the old people have gone out of the window. It's all about quick gratification. And people clapped and said, that's a very good idea to describe the 21st century. I said, no, that conversation took place in 1500 BC in Greece. We've been here before, my friends. And the fact is that we have, the checks and balances are the ancient wisdom, the stuff that happens 3 generations earlier from us, which for people who lived life and they left us the instructions of how not to get things wrong again. And we tend to forget this. It's almost like a cosmic joke, really. Throughout history, we are given the information by lots of enlightened people who've done it all, got the T-shirt, and yet we keep repeating the same mistakes. So, and the same thing when I go to conferences, people are saying, well, when is the change going to happen? And my response is, well, when would you like it to start? I've written 9 books, I've done 15 documentaries, and that's my addition to the whole thing. But I'm not really saying anything different that wasn't said before. I'm just doing it in a different way to a new audience, as does everybody else. So the fact is, the information is there for us to use. We tend to just sort of ignore it and hope that there's a magic miracle cure around the corner. And of course, there really isn't. Where we are the miracle cure. We just have to get on and do it.
I'm applauding that, mate. Honestly, it is. It's really sobering when you look at, just say, the last 50 years, just here in a Western culture, with the idea that there's a new idea. It's almost like all of a sudden, since music was executed in the 80s, where people started to re-up and refurbish classics from hundreds of years or decades before that, all of a sudden there's this new idea that's come out, and we're soberly reminded of how delusional people are, yet they don't remember. And this happens over and over again.
Yeah, and it usually takes about 3 generations for things to happen. I mean, look at the rise of the far right and fascism throughout the world is incredible. I mean, I hate to think that, I was born in a fascist dictatorship and I moved out of there to end up in another one. And I'm talking about America. I mean, I'm not going to sort of hold back on this. It's just what's happening. And people forget the dangers that this stuff brings, but that happens all around the world all the time. It only takes 3 generations for people to forget the problems that we grew out of to reach a new level of civilization, and then we degenerate back into the same level of complacency and laziness. And I'm not talking about everybody, because while you have one group of people who are also falling into that sort of decay, there are also other people who are also bringing the light, and that's what's important. But this sort of backwards and forwards between the light and the dark, it's been going on forever. And the point to remember is that we are doing much better than we were 1,000 years ago. I mean, during COVID, I was reading a very enlightening book about the year 1666, one of the most miserable years in European history, where we had the plague, and then London burned down, and then we had the Dutch-England naval war. And you think, well, it can't possibly get any worse than that. And it was absolute misery. I mean, something like half the population died of this ridiculous plague. And before you know it, bang, we're off into an age of enlightenment called the Renaissance. So out of all of this chaos that tends to enlighten people, because it pushes you to go deep into a very dark abyss, and then you get to question yourself: what did I do to get to this point? Who did I vote for? What are the choices that I made that got us into this mess? And then you suddenly wake up and realize that was not a good idea. We're in this moment right now, of people are questioning their existence because of the choices that they made. So there is hope that there will be something enlightening coming out of all of this, because it always is. So the idea is not to lose hope and sort of take it standing up, have a good sense of humor, and again, like we were talking before the show, the information has always been there. We've had enlightened people all the time. They come out of the woodwork just at the right moment when things are starting to disintegrate. And we have lots of information. We have lots of books. We have lots of seminars, videos. And the trick is to implement it. And like I said, the Hopi said it so well. We're the gods we're waiting for. The gods are there. They give us the information and they throw suggestions, and then we have to apply it in our daily lives. And otherwise, the point of reincarnation would be pointless, wouldn't it? If we come down here and say, hey, I'm going to go over there, have sushi, sit on the beach, and let you figure it out for me. It doesn't work that way, my friends.
You're brilliant. You're brilliant. I mean, in a processes of, if you were to look at reality at face value, a Taoist would have some very interesting pathways, starting with inquiry, then curiosity, contemplation. It breeds and nurtures hopium. Hopium, if approached appropriately and grown, will blossom into a belief system. That belief system is then met with, what's the experience? What's the reality? Death, destruction, rinse and repeat. Then it becomes a knowing. That knowing is very similar to a spiritual path and all that type of like cycles of psychological to physiological realization. I think it's brilliant how you're able to share that. And we do with such comedy, as we should, because, I'm a Pepsi challenge guy from the 80s. I'll take the Pepsi challenge with anyone. I'll do the taste test. There's so much nonsense out here right now. I mean, personally, I've been channeling almost 40 years. And right now, all you need to do is wave your hands around, close your eyes, and I'm channeling the Palladians. Next minute, you have 100,000 followers on YouTube, and you're making a living out of this. This is an interesting ancient technique that, if met, is actually really profound. But at a subatomic level, you're gonna witness this divinity through your own physical flesh, which is a ritual that they do it for a reason. Mm-hmm. And this is the part of repeating these type of ancient practices. And what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah, and then of course you get these people who have these enlightening moments, and they form a belief system, and a lot of people take on that belief system, and they find out it works. If you just sit still, connect with the universe, which is usually just sitting with nature. That's what I do. I mean, I take people on tours to sacred sites. I just came back from Yucatan and watched people over the course of a week change and become very different. And that's the point. You have a point of stillness. We teach, we let people go experience the temples, and then they come back with some kind of understanding. But again, bringing the modern world into it, once you've found out that there's a beautiful platform that affects so many people, then you've got the other side of the equation, which is people start turning into a religion, and they'll start creating division in between the teachings. No, you can't do that. You can only do this if you talk through me. Oh, there's a YouTube channel. Now I can make up stuff as I go along. And yeah, there's so many charlatans out there. But you know what? This was predicted decades ago, that one of the signs of a changing environment and a changing consciousness in the human race would be the overwhelming abuse of these old teachings and the amount of charlatans that would be out there. They predicted this years and years ago. So you have to be very selective. And I always said truth has a ring to it. There's some people that I used to admire a great deal when I was learning this material, and I still am. I mean, I'm not an expert on anything, and I hope I never will be an expert, because I stopped asking questions. And yet most of these people who are famous names now, they were really full of it, it turns out. When I've discovered through my own processes, my understanding, my own inquiry of the world, I found actually they're making a lot of this stuff up. Some of them are actually really, really good. And sometimes you get seduced by the money and the fame and the camera and all of that. I mean, the amount of times I've been asked to sign contracts, with lots of zeros in them, but I've watched the people who are in these companies completely change into something else. They start off as being very intuitive, very insightful, and then it becomes a gravy train. I don't want to do that. That's not what I'm doing this for. I'm doing it because something has affected me. It's helped me in my life. And if it helps me, it'll help you. Maybe. I'm just suggesting things. I'm not going to convince anybody of anything. I just hope that the tools I've developed in my life will help somebody else make the world a better place. If I do my job properly, I might get rewarded financially for it. And here I am living in a one-bedroom apartment after all this time. But that's okay. I have all I need. And the trick is I'm a better person for it. And that's the most important thing, is having that integrity and that sense of value, that when you meet certain teachings, you're able to take a little step back and go, well, this is, I don't know, this is not as good as the other person was saying. I'm going to the other person. And you have to be very selective. And at the end of it, you got to apply it. You got to go out there, be among nature, be among the sacred places, and listen to the sound of your own voice. And sometimes what you get back, you might not like what you're hearing, and you got to be honest. You got to look in the mirror and say, well, maybe I was making that up, and maybe I should just put that to the side and fix that. Because the whole point of being here is to fix yourself and have the experience, and live 80 years here on the planet Earth and say, well, I came here to have an experience. And I did the best I could. And I think I'm a better soul now that I'm going back into the collective. That, my friends, is the whole meaning of life. You come here as a soul, you have an experience, you die, you move on, you go back to the collective, and then you have another experience. And we've had millions and trillions of them. And the idea is to keep perfecting. It's a bit like taking a piece of marble out of the quarry, and you start off with, hacking away and creating, very angular shapes. But by a million years later, you've created a masterpiece like Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo. It takes time to shape the soul.
Amen to that. There's no indoctrination going on right now. To the audience, of course. I just want them to be aware of this. Look, it's fundamental. Who knows what the inner workings of Darwin's contemplation that turned into his theories that seem to be the cycle of humanity, spirituality, atheism, and religion. They spew them, and they go in and out of people's awareness over generations, as we talked about earlier. The truth is I mean, that sort of method is still being used today, society across the globe, within a method of regulating things. This is how we regulate things: through famine, war, and disease. Strange how this same formula is being used today, and it's still being repeated, rinse and repeat. And furthermore, I feel like I'm, a little delusional. I'm in the 80s, and then I realized that I've used the Atkins diet for the last 10 years, and I'm on the verge of 47 stents and potential massive heart attack, but someone's still trying to sell me the South Beach diet. And furthermore, we're now sitting here looking at ketosis as some revelation, a new way of how to lose body fat or lose weight, as most people would put it, because they're not concerned that they're actually losing muscle tissue, which then lowers their metabolism. They're losing mass. And so we're painting a pig a different color. And I mean, I really don't want the audience to look at us as a little bit more cynical and sarcastic.
Not at all, no.
No.
But you know what? I mean, one of my pet projects is to look at go back to the origin of things as far as I can. And I like talking and traveling around the world to people who've been here for tens of thousands of years. I mean, in your case, the Aboriginal cultures in Australia. I mean, when you say, well, how old is that meteorite that you remember falling down that created that valley? They said, oh, about 1 million years ago. And they're proven to be correct. And then they'll roll their eyes and say, we got older stories than that. And the idea is that I listened to what their predecessors had to say. And the one thing that always comes clear is once you lose your contact with nature, you lost contact with the divine. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about the essence of how everything was created, of which we're a part of. I mean, it's like we are the last point of the tentacle of the point of origin from where we came from. We are sending back and relaying information back to the source, whatever you want to call it, from our experience. But at the same time, we're also developing our own experience. It's a paradox. It drives your brain into a frenzy trying to understand that. But essentially, that's what's happening. And the idea is that if you go back to the most ancient people who are still around and say, well, have you managed to survive tens of thousands of years despite all of this nonsense that goes on? And they said, well, we just hear the wind. We hear the rain. We look at the sun. We look at the clouds. We know it's going to snow in early this year because now in March, we look at the way the buds of the trees are moving. And I lived in Britain back when I was writing my first book and hanging out with farmers in the least populated part of one of the most populated islands on the planet. And I'd mentioned, I've noticed that you dig your furrows aligned to the magnetic field of the earth. I mean, do you do that deliberately? Do you have a compass on your tractor? And the farmer just said, no, it just felt like the right thing to do. He's absolutely right. He doesn't need technology to know that, you're aligned with certain things. You know the flow of things. And his life is much, much easier because he understands by observing and being part of the system and the planet that gave him birth that it makes his life so much more complete. And it's not that difficult to understand. And I think so many people are losing that connection. And the one thing that differentiated us from gods, which, by the way, a god is nothing more than a spirit that's found in anything. A light bulb has a god, a blade of grass has a god, water has a god. If you and I want to understand what water is all about, and you understand the rhythms and motions of water, you become a god. So the idea is that to become the God within ourselves and understand our place in the bigger scheme of things and understand and make the sense of all of this mess that we're navigating every single day of our lives is to literally take a step back and connect with the nature of things as they really are, not as they are perceived. And we have these conversations about the media. And it's like, oh, the media is really bad. So where do you get your information from? Oh, social media. Well, that is media. And most of it's propaganda. Now, that's not fact-checking. That's just propaganda. And then people wonder why they're so misled. Well, you've allowed yourself to be misled by something that is not reality. It's an alternative reality. Go out there, switch everything off just for a few minutes and hear the birds, hear the trees, hear the blade of grass moving up, and you realize how beautiful everything really is. And you've got everything that you need to navigate life. You just have to take a deep breath, slow down, and observe what's really going on around you.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, it's funny because people sort of look at Daoism is fundamentally approachable and digestible and appealing to many people because they believe it's seated within a philosophy. Yet, as a priest, I teach people the ascended state of the immortals. But in essence, the Taoist immortal, we have, as you just put very clearly, we have a God for the kitchen. We have a God for the front door. This is just another version that is what I call a dialogue to the monologue. So the dialogue is with the spirit. The spirit is a fractal of the divine perfection, which we call the primordial mother. And you are accessing that with the new age foofy schmoofy words of Akashic and Halls of Amente. And that's the highest level of ascension for a Taoist seeker. Yeah. Furthermore, is to be in direct source with that, right? So the ascended level is physical body, energy body, spiritual body, sun body, earth body, moon body, oneness body, ultimate, and then being with all things, which is quite frankly, parallel to a Gnostic path with a little splash of a wannabe of a Rosicrucian sort of a little spice, but they never got the alchemical process down the way we did. But, this is really where it comes back to the basics. Furthermore, I always tell people, if you are on this magical mystery ride and you are gravitating to the very wisdom teaching that seems to come out of my mouth, I'm as dumb as rocks. All the information comes from another place, either my teachers, and I'll give you the joyful experience of imagining Big Trouble in Little China meets Last Airbender. They have a baby, and this is what I offer to you in your magical mystery ride of self-realization and self-mastery.
Exactly. And that I was looking at the origin of the Tao, which goes back to the Tao or the Tai of Japan, and that goes back to a time when gods mysterious. I'm talking about physical people now,
right?
It became the embodiment of a godly force, human-like but not quite human was the description. So they're very much like us, just very much taller, and usually and they're always described as having light skin with blonde hair, green eyes, or red hair, which is very weird in the Pacific 12,000 years ago. But these are the native people describing these very Caucasian-looking people, which gets me into all kinds of trouble as being racist. But it's not. These are the people who were there. And that's how they describe them. I mean, and it wasn't a sense of hierarchy either. I've never come across any story about when humans met gods and intertwined and exchanged information that there was a sense of, oh, we're better than you. You're going to do some work. I'm going to sit here and take your money. No, it was actually a mutual respect between everybody. It wasn't about race or color. It was about the fact that we are on this big boat traveling through space called the Earth, and we can't get off until you die. So you might as well respect each other, work together towards a higher state of elevation. So my point was that the Tai, the way of the gods, it means, is literally the breath, the expression of a creative source, which is then written down or memorized as an expression which becomes the Tao, which then 6,000 years later from Japan and China ends up in the Middle East, and it starts getting called the Way because it's called the Way of the Gods. You're emulating the source itself. So, by the time we get to the Essenes, they are people of the way. The Templars were practicing the same thing as well. The Rosicrucians, the Invisible College, everybody was doing exactly the same thing, but calling it by different things because by now you've got organized religion and there's some big despots who are after you because they want the information so that they can control everybody. And of course, they're not going to tell you because it requires integrity to follow this information through. It's very important. When you actually learn the true way of the gods, you are working with the very forces of nature. That's dangerous stuff. If you know how to manipulate the elements, you can create a lot of harm and you can create a great good. Energy doesn't give a damn one way or the other. It's your intention that takes it into its right course of action. So this is why when you join the mystery schools, you have to spend about 3 years learning this stuff in the old days. I mean, the Druids spent 10 years memorizing this stuff. I guess there wasn't much to do back then except for, going out, drinking water and getting something to eat and just looking at the stars. But they did it. They acquired this information. They recognized the most important thing to do with this information that we've been given is integrity. You have to apply it, and if you can just avoid all of these different distractions, you will be able to have a degree of control over your daily life, your manifestation process, and you'll be able to guide yourself as a soul much more elegantly through this very strange place called Earth. And I'm speaking from experience. I mean, I started off, buying every book that wasn't nailed to a shelf. And then 25 years later, I'm going, well, I kind of knew all of it anyway. There's a lot of common sense in all of these teachings. And it is common sense, but we forget that common sense whenever we are faced with huge problems. We tend to go into the fear module, which is the first thing you learn in these teachings. Control fear. You must control fear. Don't go there. There is reasoning fear. I mean, you don't stick your head in the mouth of a lion unless you made friends with a lion beforehand and there's an agreement. But at the same time, getting caught into that whole fear angle is one of the easiest ways to lose track of this information. So having practiced it and still practicing it, I know what I'm talking about. I'm doing this from experience and looking at me in my former earlier life in the commercial world 25, 30 years ago. I'm a much better person for it. And it's not been easy, I have to say. It doesn't get handed to you on a silver platter. If it does, you're very lucky. You will be challenged, you'll be chopped up into a million pieces, regurgitated into a new form, and you'll be spat out as a brand new person. That's what the teachings really do to you. So again, I'm just sort of the living example, I suppose, of many of these teachings, and I'm still learning. I find that I'm still scratching the surface of so much information. But the trick is, you got to integrate it. You got to put it into practice, and you will fall over. There's no doubt about it. The trick is, don't make a habit of falling over. Learn from it, get up again, and do it better the next time. And don't judge yourself too harshly, because let's face it, if we remember the book of life when we were born, life would be so much easier. But that's not how it happens, is it? You forget everything. And here's the funny part. You spent the whole of your life watching films, documentaries, buying books, going to lectures and conferences about how to become a better person. And then you knew this anyway, but you forgot when you came here. It's the biggest joke of all, really, isn't it?
Oh, my goodness. You touched on such an interesting topic for the avid rugby fan. So when you merge the Japanese and the Chinese timeline of the very origins of Daoism, or Dao, as you put it, you find it very perplexing, because China has the incredible ability to erase their history and furthermore forget about what they've really done and perpetrated on their citizen just within, the last 6,000 years, as you put it. That's an interesting turning point from an understanding of when we discovered, oracle bone reading and pictographs as a form of ledging and logging information. And that was drawn out through this guy by the name of Yellow Emperor, who lays claim to the infrastructure of Chinese culture as you know it today. Now, this within Taoist canons and things of that nature is very limited. I take it with a pinch of salt, because, it's very easy to say these things and claim them and then log them on a piece of paper. And that just happens to be bullshit logged on a piece of paper 4,000 years ago. So it's like that, this relationship that we have with the shakuhachi. It's like, no, its origins were in China. No, it's a Japanese flute, and it's very well known. And I have a very, very much a love affair with the shakuhachi. And you go back and forth with where did it really come from? And this is the part where, when you really merge deeper into this stuff, and just right back to the simplicity of you're bringing the attention of the audience that we are a fractal of God. God is us. We are, you could use hermetic principles of as above, so below. I mean, people refer to this all the time, and it's sort of like a contemplation. They have no true understanding, but they talk on it. It's a conceptual. And so, within Taoism, the simplicity is this: there is a center point within everything. We reveal reality as a bellows. That's it. Everything is contracting and expanding at the same time. You're all things and nothing at the same time. Further inquiry, you look for that center point. For a Taoist, the center point is the Wu Ji. So between the symbiotic effect of breathing in and out, which is the simplicity of the polarizing effects of electromagnetism, within what someone would perceive as dualistic perception, looking for the non-dualist is the unification of all things. We are all things. We are one. Physicists might refer to it as, this is a Max Planck unit of energy that refers to the entanglement of the universe. Furthermore, this is a 0 point, right? The 0 point is everything. And I mean, it's so funny because there are physicists right now, and you I imagine you listen to a lot of this stuff with your own journeys. And there's a guy by the name of Nassim Haramein.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And so he has just had this epiphany where he's like, oh my goodness, this black hole energy is within everything. And I'm like, okay, listen, I mean, personally, I've been teaching this alchemical process biologically since I re-upped and refreshed my memory that I've done this 1,000 times before in other lives. And here we are today, and I'm teaching these ancient practices. We call it the death of a star, the rising of the red phoenix, revealing black hole energy. Now, black hole energy in of itself is what we refer to as the primordial mother, the void. And the void is not yin nor yang. These are byproducts of this material state in bringing evidence to that through the creation of the primordial mother. And people are like, what the? I don't get. Jufu, this is a paradox. This is screwing my mind. Yes, it is. But the simplicity of it is this. I always remind people, I'm like, are you sure you weren't a Taoist in a past life? This symbiotic relationship, your bat signal is the yin and yang. Drop that down on anything and your template will be realized. You will find the center point. Your mission, if you choose to accept that Ethan Hunt, is to find that vesica. And when you find it, you are a Sherlock to your Watson. Elementary, my dear Watson. That is that center point to everything. It's so funny how it comes back to it, right?
It's as easy as the breath. I mean, you take a deep breath in and then you hold it and you breathe out and you reach that point and you come back in. It's those points of balance between the two that where you need to be. That's where you discover magic. The point of balance. Really hard. It's easy to say, very hard to achieve. I can't say I've mastered it in my life. I try. Sometimes when I'm just by myself.
We can hang out with a couple of beers and I'll teach you. No problem.
That usually works. There's a time dilation that goes with really good beer or really good, expensive scotch. And I call it research or extensive research in some cases. But it's actually true in my case. I'm not an alcoholic by any means. No, I know the tools that get me to work as a person and bring out the best in me. And sometimes sitting down with a good glass of scotch actually puts me in a very contemplative mood. I don't have to be drunk to understand this. I just have to be in that moment of not thinking and yet thinking. The bit in between is what I really like to experience and explore. The fine moment where you're not taking a breath and you're not giving a breath. That's when real magic happens. And any mystery schools worth their salt will teach you this. The Freemasons, Scottish Rite, who essentially were the Knights Templar under a different name just to get away from persecution. Not the London Rite, but it's a completely different set of Freemasonry. But if you look at the flaws in their preceptories, the checkerboard pattern of black and white, it's not about stepping on the blackboard. It's not about stepping on the white board. It's about walking in between the two. It's that state between states that's very magical. The Celts have the same thing for it, where, you might look at the compass and go, well, north, south, east, west, well, that presents earth, air, fire, and water. Yeah, but it was the points in between the diagonals were the most magical for the Celtic people or the Gaelic people. A Celt is someone who wasn't a Roman, by the way. That's what a Celt was. So the Gaelic people understood that the points in between are the magical transmutation points where magic occurs, which just happens to coincide with the winter solstice when you go from total dark and the light starts coming back again. There's 3 points between 21st and the 25th of December where the resurrected hero And now I'm talking about something that's over 12,000 years old, not 2,000 years old. Like Horus, who's the resurrected interpretation of Osiris, who goes into the underworld, remakes himself, comes back as a bird on the 25th of December. That's a very old story. So that idea that you transmute between one state and the next is the point of rebirth, where you get to look at the world again and go, well, winter's here, but doesn't mean we're dead and everything's gloomy. No, now we have now a point of light. What do we do with this point of light? Where can we go with this point of light for the next year? And just when you reach the highest point of the light, the dark starts taking over again, and the whole thing goes backwards and forwards. It really is that simple when you bring it down to using the breath as an analogy, or even the tide of the beach going in and out. It's those magical points as to where it goes out, and you go, oh, is it coming back in? Yeah, the wave's coming back in, and it goes right up to your feet and it stops. And if you just go to the beach, and I'm very lucky, I live about 10 minutes away from the beach. I just go there at low tide and watch the tide almost doing nothing, reaching a point of 0 point, as you said. And it's magical, where nothing goes in and nothing goes out. It's magical, and there's not a sound. There's no wind. There are no birds. And I sit there contemplating this magical moment where the sea isn't going in or out, and I suddenly realized I've lost 15 minutes of time, and I've gone away into all kinds of explorations, answering my own problems and my own questions, and then I go home and write a book on it. That's usually how the process starts, a process of inquiry. But again, what I'm writing about ends up being a mirror of how I'm feeling at the time. And it's also an answer to the problems that I brought with me to the planet Earth that I'm trying to figure out. So one thing feeds into the next. And it really is that simple. We don't have to get into massive formulae. And, and I joke about this with Nasserim on elevators around the world. We tend to meet in elevators or lifts if you're from Britain. I don't know. We always talk to each other and go, we really must get together, but we're all so busy that we always meet in elevators and have a quick conversation between floors. And I say, it doesn't have to be that complicated. It should be very, very simple. And if I look at some of the ancient Egyptian mysteries, it all boils down to 42 phrases that the pharaoh used to, or any person could look in the mirror and say, this morning, I've just got up. Have I killed anyone? Have I taken the mother away from its breastfeeding? Have I plucked a fruit from a tree before its time? These are the foundation of the basic forms of how to live well. Eventually, by the time you get to the Catholic Church, they did away with 32 of them, and he went down to the 10 Commandments. So it's important to read all 42 of them, because they are wonderful ways to start the morning. Look in the mirror and say, have I been truthful to myself? Have I coveted my neighbor's wife? Have I stolen my neighbor's chariot? These are simple codes of conduct. It doesn't require a mathematical equation. It just requires you to, again, be mindful and put it into practice. So just like the Tao, again, it always comes back to the Tao in the end. These things should be very, very simple and very applicable in any form of everyday life.
I think you've hit on a really good point. The universe doesn't have a moral compass, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, when you get down to the get down, the very virtue signaling which we speak of deep within what we call the magical register, and I just transcribed it with my teacher that I commune with on a second-by-second basis. I'm not psychologically deficient or potentially on the point of breaking where I'm going to go insane. I've had this dialogue for over 30 years, almost 40 years, with this source of information that is reliable. It comes in the form of a spirit immortality expression of the fractal God, Tao, universe, Lao Tzu. So I just transcribed the 2024 version of the Tao Te Ching, the Tao Te Ching, however you want to pronounce it, with him. And we refer to it as the magical register. There are 81 incantations, which each incantation has 81 levels of consciousness. It has a frequency, a shape, and a color. And you go on a magical mystery ride that goes well beyond any acid the Beatles dropped back in the 60s, just by speaking those words that are not words. They are imbued forms of energy potential that evoke a visceral, kinesthetic, and somatic response to the seeker, because you are becoming whole. When you speak that incantation, it returns you to whole, which gives you this revelation that brings you back to that center point that we were talking about, my dear friend, just a few moments ago. And we call that the Wu Ji. That's the primordial mother. So when we return to the breath, we refer to it as the respiration, which is the seed of the starting point, because our purpose, our goal as a Taoist seeker is to go from a seeker to a knower. And what you want to do is bring it. To bring it is to bring immortality, crystallize it into this material form. That is said evidence and self-realization for anyone that is looking to ascend to an awareness that there's something greater out there. What happens when you develop these ascended states through the alchemical process? You create just a default. It's like a cheat code. You instantly are selfless and in servitude. You can't fight it. You have no other option other than to continually walk the path, and then selfishness breeds selflessness that reveals the truth and the nature of all things. Where most of my students are like, "Oh, do you feel better? I just want to learn the fun stuff, the burning things with transmitting energy and zapping people and levitating and physical healing and telepathy and clairvoyance." I mean, these all go under the guise of this one umbrella that I refer to as just sensory perception. Just so happens I teach people all these things, but I don't get the same dance card as someone who just woke up and they're channeling the Palladians these days. And oh, that's that dusty old guy that I think he's a Taoist priest. Well, there's nothing there to really talk about, because I need this new age guy that has the perfect haircut and the perfect beard cut and the perfect hairspray, that emulated identity of potentially the next coming of Jesus is the very answer to my prayers of what is spirituality, which seems to come around. I find it's perplexing, because all the people that turn up on my doorstep are doctors of Chinese medicine, functional medicine doctors, light workers, Reiki masters, Qigong masters, all these masters of healing, where they're really deficient because they're a jack of all trades and a master of nothing. And the first question I ask them is, why are you here? Well, I still haven't got it down. Okay. So with all the techniques, all the money you spent, you still can't squeak out some type of like self-realized self-evidence of something greater. It's like this transitory moment where you give someone a bump and, oh my goodness, I feel so much lighter. I feel fantastic. And they wake up the next day and they're screaming at you for their money back because the healing never took place. This is a delusional state that happens over and over again. And what happens is most people don't understand the currency is your attention. The currency of this material state is your attention. So if I was to summarize this with a little, homage, a prayer to Mr. Nassim, I would say it's like to wave to matter a particle. Realize with your attention, intention, cutting from the cloth of perfection, the primordial mother, what my dear friend, the Buddhist monk, would call the dukkha, the distortion. You are now creating this currency that we call, a dear friend of mine, shout out to Gary. He goes, currency, that's right. It's a current and you see it. And I'm like, that's right. I get down with it, Gary. That currency is energy. That is the currency. And that energy is created, and it is vibratory. It is frequential. And if met, and you listen to all your manifesting teachers across the globe, if met without the values from the secret, is why you never get the answer. It's still a secret. Is don't meet it with your own values. It's the present moment, and it's a resonance. It has nothing to do with how long you've walked the path or how enlightened you are. If you can't hold it within this physical body, which is really an anchor to your own conscious journey, and once you understand that it's nothing more than that, you become all things. And so now you get down with it. Now that present moment that you're speaking of, that we refer to as the Wu Ji, the primordial mother, is the secret source. It's the unification of yin and yang. You reveal that, and when you hold the resonance, it's what we call Wu Wei. Bruce Lee brought it to everyone's attention back in the
Yeah.
70s, the last minute before he died, where he referred to it as the flow, baby. And that's effortless action, effortless effort. Once met, all of a sudden everything is now crystallized into reality, and it's not a delusional transitory state. There's a permanence we call the point of no return, where you detach to attach. So you have imperium, dominion over all things. Your attention, intention forms and creates within this material. And you, as you put it earlier, you are God. That is it. And when you're able to do that, crazy shit takes place. Super paranormal stuff becomes super normal. But
Yeah.
there's a resonance that it has to be acquired, which I think a lot of people tend to forget about.
Exactly. I mean, George Lucas actually did it quite well in the 70s when he encapsulated that belief into the Force. That's what it is. And if you tap into this energy that's all around us all the time, and you apply your attention, and then your intention becomes the arrow that sends that force into a desired location, yeah, incredible things can happen. And practice, like driving a car, the more you do it, the better you get at it. People keep saying to me, well, can you use that to win the lottery? I said, yeah, done it, been there. And you know what? Every time I do it, something happens where some distraction occurs where I go up to put the ticket and the drawing's already occurred, because it's not part of my life path to become rich by winning the lottery. The management just says, yeah, we're just showing you this as a technique, a bit of a laugh, and the joke's on you, that, yeah, you can use this to do whatever you want, but if it's not part of your sole purpose, then it's not going to happen anyway. And if you keep pushing it, it will happen. And quickly you realize that that's not going to be good for you in the end. It's a bit like sort of walking down the street as a guy and saying, oh, I really want that woman in my life. Isn't she beautiful? Blah, 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 blah. And of course, you're thinking with a certain part of your body, and your soul is saying, well, that's probably not the woman for you, because we have other plans, remember? And you're going, yeah, forget that, because this was more beautiful than anything else I've ever seen. And you push the issue, and your soul will say, okay, well, you can have the girl. And 6 months later, you're sitting there miserable, looking at your belly button going, look at what she did to me. And it did not work out too well. And now I'm really in hell. Yeah, because now the universe has said, well, this is direction. And the direction was plan A. You went to plan B, which is nothing wrong with that. You know, it's part of the experience. But now that you've been destroyed, and your insides are now outside and you're feeling terrible for yourself, do you want to go back to plan A, or do you want to go to plan C and be further away from the path? So it goes back again to the use of energy and mindfulness. If you can do this on a daily basis, if you can discover these tools to find out why you're here and why you're walking this path, then you're doing very well. You're what the Egyptians called a well-provided light being. You can understand the ways of the mysteries of the Force, and most of the teachings really come down to the experience of going out of body and returning with information. I wrote a book years ago called The Lost Art of Resurrection, which dealt with all of the people on the planet who've been doing this for thousands of years. And, you know, even with the Tai in Japan, they used to go away for 3 days, consume a poison, have an induced near-death experience, and they literally left the body, went walkabout in the other world with a very determined idea of where they were going and what they were looking for. And when they got there, they spoke to this kind of people, teachers, and they got information, woke back into the body 3 days later, declared risen from the dead, which is a very old phrase, by the way. And they went about and applied it. They didn't talk about it. They applied it in their lives. So Leonardo da Vinci suggested that he had done it. Isaac Newton certainly implied that he had done it. He couldn't talk about it because of the religious political belief of his era. But people like Plato, Pythagoras did it 5 times, and it shaped his metaphysical doctrine. So all of these people would disappear without taking drugs. They would actually ingest a poison to leave the body temporarily, come back with valuable information. And the idea was that you understand the nature of everything. And Plato himself said, for all the things he's written, the guy's a genius, but yet the most important thing he ever said was, truth and knowledge can only be found in one place, and that's the other world. And you have to go there. That's where everything exists in its pure state. Everything else is an approximation or a diluted version of the original. So if you want to know how things really work and how to apply them in life, you have to kill yourself in order to live. Yeah, death was actually the best adventure. And if you can do that while you're living, when you finally die, you'll be a very happy person, because there'll be no pain, there'll be no fear, and you continue a journey on another level of reality. That's quite a benefit. And I see so many teachers around the world, and I'm sure Lao Tzu was one of them. These things don't just happen in a vacuum. They come from a certain experience. So whether he sat looking at butterflies in the middle of a blossom field in China, or whether he actually did the ceremony, which is what the Tai Yi was actually about, the third year of the learning of Tai Yi involved in near-death experience, then he actually put it into practice, and he left the information for all of us. So again, not very difficult, but yet it requires persistence and curiosity to look at this information, and then application.
Yeah, it brings me back to, the Atkins diet. It's really popular right now. The OBE, the sleep paralysis, is the redundant old pink, and they're refurbishing it and reconditioning it and handing it to you as a new gem. When you master what we call Shen projection, you are accessing all states at once, and you're able to master the ability to maestro and have dominion over all frequencies within this duality. And that comes in all different forms. And that's where we go deep into the magic. Sleep paralysis is a sort of a more redundant sort of caveman way of potentially losing it all with something that you can access instantaneously. When you activate what we call the substance, the Fajin, when you activate the plasma that will literally manipulate, dictate everything within this space, realizing that we are abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite, this moves all the moral compass bullshit out of the way, where, the karmic model is, if you do this, this will happen. The seesaw of the symbiotic response of good and evil, that, that is the effect of the universe. The universe is abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. I have so many guys that end up on my doorstep with fundamental issues where they're literally going to die because someone told them they have to, abstain from sexual activity to find the inner workings of Taoist alchemy. And they end up literally at a point where, in some cases, there's no return, and they damage their internal organs because people become obsessed with this element of yang. Yang is really what yang is the emission of all colors. Yin is the absorption of all colors. And the center point is being able to harness everything at once and use it to acquire information, as you put it, right? So when you acquire the information, the self-evident realization is undeniable. And so for me, I'll do something as simple as, I'm down here in Nevada or so, Las Vegas, just down on the strip. Sometimes we play street magic with my kids. I got 6 kids. I like teaching them the fundamentals. I teach them remote viewing, healing, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, telepathy, clairvoyance. We haven't gone deep into channeling yet because they get completely out of control. If you give them a teaspoon of sugar, they're already channeling some other sugar god that wants to burn my house down. But fundamentally, when you can access this stuff, and I walk up to someone and give them their mental, emotional, physical, spiritual state within a 5-second period, just by reading their energy, because it's a sensory perception, it's a development. The reason people get a bite of the spiritual dragon and they are always pursuing that for the rest of their natural born life is because there's a method to the madness. This is like, a lot of people are like, well, is it a certain? No, you don't have to command anything. When you understand and are shown how to cultivate these practices, it will be self-evident. It will be realized within you, and you will activate this ongoing incredible source and access to have dominion over your 50 trillion cells that you call the flesh and blood that looks back at you in the mirror as the starting point to your excitement. Your curiosity is now flamed by that, and you start to create. And that is the evidence. It's like nothing is more powerful than these ancient practices. Now, I will say, full disclosure, I went head first into this stuff within a week, and it acquired all the possible activations that anyone could possibly imagine within a spiritual path inside of 7 days over 30 years ago. Now, it starts with never meditating before, and I literally stopped sound. And I'm like, hang on, I'm come from basically a troglodyte state of a bodybuilder and power lifter with no sense of anything other than crushing things, moving into the idea that, hey, I've heard Hare Krishnas and gurus with hairy armpits that eat alfalfa spouts are meditating. I don't know what that is, but there's a voice in my head telling me, hey, guess what? I need to find this. Stopping sound for 15 minutes, moving into channeling my teacher the following day, channeling and becoming expert in clairvoyance the following day, distant healing, then a physical healing. And the reason I'm fast forwarding this is because everyone's heard it 1,000 times. You want to hear the story? Go and look up one of the 57,000 interviews I've had about this. But the fundamental issue is you get there, and the thing that blew my mind was when I witnessed flesh, gangrenous, back to pink in color in 40 minutes. And now, furthermore, my journeys have been the same throughout this 30 plus years, where evidence, as a dear friend of mine, Tom Campbell, would call, the probability of your attention intention changing those numbers is instant, as it should be. It's beyond light speed. But you have to sink your teeth into the substance. You have to sink your teeth into what you know is not a delusional state, but you are literally changing the energy within this state and acquiring what someone would call a supernatural experience. I'm very well known for people coming to me. Grandma's in a coma. They're telling her she has 24 hours to die. And I go, hang on a second, let me check. Oh, no, Grandma doesn't want to die. She just isn't loved by any of you individuals, specifically you, who claims you are her daughter that loves her to death. Now she's feeling like her heart is broken and she just wants to check out. No, I want Mommy to live. Okay, excellent. We have a contract. We have a commitment that we want to love each other. One was lying, the other one wasn't. So Grandma comes out of the coma the next day with the vitals regulated. The doctors are, what the f is going on here? And then the daughter, which I already knew this, but this is part of this symbiotic yin and yang experience, that I knew that she really wanted Mommy to die because I don't have time for this old bag. She's irritating me. And the mother realized that. So the following day, 3 or 4 hours after she came out, she died because the daughter really was shocked. She came back to me and goes, she's awake. She's fine. And I'm like, and what seems to be the problem? And I'm like, you do understand that you have disdain for your mother and have had an issue with her most of your life. So you were really virtue signaling. But how did you know that? I was just doing this out of the kindness of my heart because a friend of mine told me to come and see you. And there was no way that was going to actually happen. Well, now your mother's really upset. So her broken heart is going to result in moving right along. And so these things happen, but you have to master these states. Ascended state of consciousness and that center point that you speak of is what, Taoists refer to as direct source information. And channeling has been the main source of ancient indigenous practices, I believe, since anyone could ever write down or document or in some way transcribe what has been experienced over human history. And this is the stuff that you've been pursuing your whole lifetime and made aware of, and being able to share that wisdom teaching with all the people that have read your books or have followed your path in your natural born life. This is the thing. But the problem is most people hear this undertone of a reflection more of their personality and a deficiency. That brings me to when you said the emotions. That's the ground level. We take the new Harry Potter wannabe alchemist to the basement, and that's the first thing you master. Your emotions don't control you; you control your emotions. So people, as authoritarian, you can't do that. Oh yeah, and it happens real quick. I'll show you how fast it happens. What are your thoughts on that?
Emotion, energy and motion. You have to feel it. You have to feel this stuff. Yeah, and you have to be honest about it as well. It's not saying, "Oh, I feel it." No, you have to be honest with yourself and say, is this genuine? Is it a genuine feeling? Because if it is, that carries a lot of power. And properly channel that emotion creates incredible things. You get incredible insights. In fact, it's the best drug of all, actually, if it's properly understood. And many people don't seem to understand how it really is. So, well, I'm very emotional about this. No. You're anxious about it. That's not. It's a state of emotion. Anxiety is just one of those finer states. I'm talking about a sense of almost love. A sense of fluid love without attachment. It's so hard to master. I mean, I've done it several times in my life, mostly when I had the right partner to do it with, and it was when you get that wonderful relationship with someone where there's this non-attachment, but it's this incredible unconditional love for the person that you're with. Incredible things happen, and I've seen it happen in my life. Events should be happening so quickly, manifestation was happening so quickly that you just go on to the next thing before it's manifested, because you accept that the universe will just manifest it for you because you set it in motion. You trust the process. And I was watching this going backwards and forwards for months, and I realized, I look in the mirror one morning, I thought, is my ego getting out of control now? Because this is where it's going. I feel so powerful now. And I had to take a step back. And I had very sensible teachers around me who would remind me every day, you got to look in the mirror. This stuff is this emotion, this feeling, it's an incredible drug. And it's a huge force. It's like an atomic bomb. And it needs to be held under control. Again, going back to the balance, too much this way, you're going to get a massive ego out of it. You're going to get power. That's not what it's about, unless it's part of your makeup. I mean, that's not my particular reason why I'm here. Or you're going to go the other way and use it to destroy. You've got to find that fine line, use that emotion, that integrity, and that movement of energy called intention to draw all this energy, to put it in the right action, and properly done and properly under the right supervision, you can achieve great things, and you can discover mastery of yourself, and don't follow somebody else as an example. Take what makes sense to you, because we're all here doing individual things. Much of what I do in my life, 95% of it may not apply to anybody else because it applies to me as a soul. If it applies to somebody else because they're following a similar trajectory, that's fantastic. Then I can be an example of someone who's already done it, been there, and got the T-shirt, and it's going to make their life better. But you still have to hone it in a certain way that it's appropriate to your path, because my path is not your path. And I always tell people who say, well, I've been following you and I want to follow you. I said, don't follow me. What are you talking about? Don't follow me. Why? Because if tomorrow morning I discover that my compass was pointing south, where are you going to be? And there's this wonderful silence. It's like, you're going to go off the cliff as well, like a lemming. You don't want to do that. Take what any teacher and anyone has said that makes sense to you, put it in your toolbox, apply the other experiences in your life as additional tools, and now you've got your own toolbox, and now you can do incredible things with it. So the trick is we're all learning from each other to try and figure out how to navigate this very troublesome three-dimensional world and do the best we can. The best you can do is just borrow things from different people and then apply it with your own toolbox and find your own way. I think that's the safest way of doing things. You'll never go wrong. You'll never let yourself down.
Yeah. I mean, it really is, as we put it within Taoism, the teacher is the student is the teacher.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, once again, it's that symbiosis where it is this one source with these two polarizing extremes, and you find that center point that is where you meet in the middle. This is the secret source. This, furthermore, is the self-realization, and the evidence is experiential. That is how you find whether it's true or not, is you will feel it viscerally, kinesthetic, somatic. The union here through our conversation, there are moments of highlights where the charge is representative in your physical body. You know what I'm saying is real. You can feel it.
Yeah.
And so then we get into reunited and it feels so good. So when you get to that point, you have
we're getting close to ABBA territory now.
right. You get quite, the problem with most people is the virtue signaling. So as a Taoist, the bottom level of the barrel is love, because it's subjective until otherwise noted. You know what you know, you don't know what you don't know. So love is this identity politics of the finite mind that is bankrupt.
Yeah.
And this is how we're given this reality. Oh, it's all love, it's all oneness, and I still want to kill my neighbor. You will not see signs of that at all, because everything is perfection. But to ascend to that, you start with love, because love can be razor blades and bunny rabbits to you and unicorns and rainbows to me. Until you ascend and you're able to hold a resonance, it's really diluted. And then furthermore, you go from love to gratitude. Gratitude is a real nice little game changer for most people, because you can give someone $1 or a compliment, they're going to find it instantly. It's almost a great way to groom and get past their personality and find something that is universal within everyone instantaneously. You want to see something instantly, that's all it takes. And then the ascended state after that is accepting and allowing all things. That's it. It's like, whoa, hang on, what do you mean accepting and allowing all things? What if you wake up and you come home and you realize the neighbor's nailing your wife, you're going to accept that? Really? Yeah, but what happens is I call it the 72-hour challenge. As I said, I'll do the Pepsi taste test with anyone. Bring it, show me. If you start accepting and allowing everything, within 24 hours, you have a really big problem, because the drama, the misery, the depression, the anxiety, the fear all starts to dissipate. They're like, oh my goodness, it can't be this easy. And within 48 hours, they're like, I'm just like dancing on the tiptoe of just fairy dust, where things just flow for whatever reason, because I am accepting and allowing these things. They just disappear, and I'm not realizing that I am the obstructor, the chief obstructor of my reality, by injecting myself into what is already perfection. Your participation is not required to witness these miracles. And so all of a sudden, hang on a second, by the 72nd hour, they are begging for mercy. I need drama. I need to hate my neighbor. This is so fundamentally wrong for me. I can't possibly fit into this club because there's no drama anymore. As what is it? Mary J. Blige, no more drama in my life. This is how simplistic.
Rock star inside you.
Right. How simplistic is this? And furthermore, let's get back to the brass tacks, as my grandmother would say. It's just as simple as your glass half empty or half full.
That's a very good point. It's like, you find your neighbor coming home and with your partner. Well, if you can just master the idea that and I see this a lot with my life as well. I tend to see the everyday life as though I'm standing behind a plate glass window, and I'm observing something else. I'm kind of partly detached from the world, and I observe the situation, and I thought, you know what? Well, then if that happened to me, what would I do? Well, that would teach me that the person I'm with doesn't really love me, and is not honest to me. So that guy did me a favor in the end, and it'll still hurt. You'll still go through the process of mourning and grieving, and what did I do to deserve this? Blah blah blah. That's fine. You have to go through that anyway, and the quicker you get rid of it, the better as well, because then you don't start drinking huge amounts of very expensive scotch, which is not very good for you. But the point is, sometimes things happen that you perceive to be bad or destructive because that's not your path. Or maybe you're supposed to learn from that to perfect yourself. We should look at these examples in life when they happen as being stepping stones to something much better. If you can get to that point, you don't have to believe what I'm saying. Acceptance is the key to everything. That you have to accept that you chose this incarnation for a reason that you will not understand until you die. That's the ultimate play that you're in. All the world is a stage, as the many people who were Shakespeare wrote. We're not going to get into that conversation, but yeah, you are on a stage. You're here on a platform, and you're remembering the lines, but you didn't know the fact that you made the play up in the first place. So all the things that happen in life, which are good and bad, are just expressions of a reality that are trying to get you to become perfect. So if you can just step away from the emotion of the event and look at the event and go, now, what's the bigger picture here? You've done so much better than 90% of the human race already. And I can't tell you how liberating it is when you get to that point. If you watch, for
when your
example,
neighbor is nailing your wife.
exactly.
It's
I mean,
so
and if
liberating.
it's very personal, something very, or someone's, shooting a parent or something. I mean, yeah, it's not very pleasant. If you can just step away from the experience and look, and it takes courage to do it. I'm not saying you have to be like a robot and become, inhuman. That's not what it's about. It's about stepping away and back a little bit from the emotion of the event, not getting caught up in the event itself. If you can get to that point, you've done really, really well. And there have been those moments in my life where I've watched that and I just step back a little bit because my first impulse is to punch someone. And then I go, wait a minute, that's not me. I don't do violence. It takes a lot to get me angry. So I step back a little bit. I'm going, what am I getting out of this? Okay. And I take a deep breath and just calm down a little bit. And believe me, the situation resolves itself. And next morning you wake up, you're actually feeling a lot better for the whole thing. You understand. And I usually use the analogy of the big tsunami in Indonesia about 15 years ago, where in the blink of an eye, 150,000 people drowned. Okay, terrible event, really horrible, life destruction on a massive scale. Now, step back a little bit from that. What did we gain from this? One, if you can just accept that everyone comes to the planet and incarnates to have an experience, is it not possible that some people also agreed to die during a tsunami? And some people agreed to survive. And some people agreed to go and fly to these devastated areas and help the survivors. Yes, all of those things are absolutely true. But the one thing I learned from that experience was that governments pledged billions of dollars in money to rebuild the Indonesia. The money never got there. None of it ever got there. What happened was that people like you and me donated clothes, food, money to the survivors to help them rebuild. And suddenly you realize all of these people around the world that have never met or come in contact with people in Indonesia, you gave something because it was helping. It was assisting a situation. Why? Because we realize an empathy that connects us all. So you've taken a terrible situation and now you realize, my empathy towards people I've never met, that tells me something about my moral compass, that it got me to get off my chair and donate and do something about the situation, even though I am 5,000 miles away. So the biggest lesson is that we're actually all one. We all look after each other. So you see what I'm saying? It's just a simple example of how you can get around a terrible problem, distance yourself from the emotion of the event and look at the big picture. What do we get out of this? What good can come out of this? And that's how I look at a situation like that. And if you take it on a personal level, the same thing will apply. Of course, putting into practice is the hard part, as you know. So, yeah,
Well,
coming home and finding
I'm
your life changed, it's a challenge. So that's when your teachings are, you're challenged to find out. You've got the teachings. Are you going to put it into practice?
well, I feel like I'm Marty and Doc Brown going back to the future, and I'm in this special relationship with Samuel L. Jackson as I ask for another cup of coffee and garçon, just one more thing, garçon. And furthermore, it enters into this generational shift where no one wants to be accountable. And so this is the first point
Yeah.
of where Lao-Tzu teaches you the secret source of yin and yang. The first point of healing is to be accountable for your behavior.
Yeah.
And so they dismiss it. Things that eke my personality is leave it up to the universe. The universe will make everything perfect. Sorry. No.
It owes you nothing. The universe owes you nothing.
but nailing your wife or your wife being nailed, or furthermore, having the incredible distress and disturbing event of being the cuckold, witnessing that horrible event, is more evidence of be careful what you wish for, because the universe is this hall of mirrors. So when you go, oh my goodness, all day long, every day, I go off to work and I'm like, I really don't want my hot wife to know the neighbor next door, or I don't want to experience what it feels like if I'm being cheated on. And the universe goes, whoa, what did you say? As your personal genie, I will give you your first wish. What wish? I'm going to give you the experience of what it feels like to be cheated on. What? Hang on. Whoa. You want this experience. You've asked for it. So I'm going to share it with you. This is the fundamental issue and deficiency of that symbiosis within yin and yang that people don't understand. They go from one extreme to the other. The center point is not a fine line. It is a freaking channel, and it's not in the Nile. It's not in Egypt. It is a massive access to substance. And when people talk about, oh, the subtle body, they're nonsensical and conceptual at most. And clearly, I'm not talking about the substance that is this material, because you're experiencing it in this state. To go out of body, you still have to register. This is the tuning fork of your reality. Even though you're consciousness, you're handed this on your path of self-realization, immortality. Just a plug, my book, The Return, The Immortals, Self-Realization of the Path Using Crystalline Alchemy for now. Anyway, that's a plug. We won't go there, but it's a great read. And if you really want to understand alchemy and actually not the nonsense that people bullshit you with, where they claim they're going to teach you Qigong, I'll actually teach you Qigong and you will empower yourself. But that whole thing is that generation right now, generation Alpha or Z or X or whatever, these we're the wet nurses. When I was as a child, I started my first job when I was 6. I was basically entertaining myself by the time I'm 8, going in and out of the city, jumping on buses, doing whatever, with no fear of the local pedo or chomo having at it, because that wasn't part of the societal norm. And furthermore, the mind control nonsense that's going on in the masses, because this is how you affect a mass audience. You just start with the fear. The fear, if you're emotional, you're suggestible. If you're emotionally suggestible, this is the gateway into someone's unconscious, ladies and gentlemen. I teach people this. This is the ground level basement, where you go from the basement to the first floor. The first floor is realizing everything is conscious and unconscious, referring back to the yin and yang, understanding that if you are able to enter that and become one, which means that you have a brainwave. And I've never witnessed any healing of any kind. I've seen bones fuse, physical flesh fuse before my very eyes. I've seen tumors disappear, the whole thing. Now, I am no place, no person, no thing at that moment. It's now. There is no, I'm not sitting here going, I need to call the universe in, light 3 incense and wait for my fairies to give me this empowered immortality. It is now, and that's the substance. That's where you refer to detachment or observation. Nothing moves my needle. It doesn't matter. You put a gun to my head. I've had about 12 or 15 people do that in my lifetime. It's interesting, to say the least. This is when you hold that path and you walk it, and people realize, and I've been in many situations as a priest where people realize, oh, well, you're a priest, you can't divulge this information. I'm like, sure, whatever you say. And you hear the stories of these people that have perpetrated, heinous crimes on humanity. And furthermore, I agree with you. To ascend, you will become selfless and in servitude, and that unified state just so happens to identify as love. But furthermore, if you are all things, that's just a byproduct of that. That's the problem. People get caught up in, if I virtue signal and I get into my heart, oh, hang on a second, who's that? Oh, that's that person that really chopped it up, Mr. Joe Dispenza, who was a kook for 20 years, and all of a sudden he got enough people to come together and use mirror effects of mirror neurons to get a healing where people started to believe, holy shit, he's onto something. There's mass healing. There's people that are either being completely commandeered and indoctrinated into his cult, which is probably the answer. But furthermore, we're seeing evidence in the brainwave state. Now, I always see, I've measured my brainwaves for years, normally between 40, 100 hertz, I'm witnessing physical flesh, which defies the Hawkins scale of consciousness, which I think is nonsensical. Hey, whatever, put a frequency to something and make you feel better, get a tuning fork, hit it, and we'll replicate this stuff. There's so much of this stuff where you hit the path and you know the result. It comes, the proof is in the pudding. The method is in the madness. You must be able to create that result. So when someone begs to never witness someone pegging their wife, you're going to find that because you are emotionally corrupted. This is how we use Taoist magic, right? We use the polarizing effect. So we drop unification in, and whatever the prescription or the magic and its directive, that mandate will be realized through the deficiency of this realm. And so whatever the energy is, how you want to look at it, when we teach body dowsing, power centers, vortices, grids, all this kind of good stuff, you will be subject to it if fear is part of your formula of reality, which is emotional content. 99% of people are emotional. So you're suggestible. And it's only until you are able to realize that you are all things, which comes from the substance, and you have to have it repeatable, or it's just conceptual, it's nonsensical, but you have to be accountable. So as Mr. Dispenza would say, no one likes to light a match in a dark place. And so when you light the match in the dark place, this really is this, you know, does anyone realize you're being commandeered when people keep quoting this incredible spiritual insightfulness of Carl Jung, which was just another psychological head screw like Sigmund Freud. So these things are coming together over time. They get recycled, and shadow work all of a sudden is popular. It's like, if you look at that as such, then you're going to be subject to whatever comes out of that. You call wolf, the spirit entities come in. 30 plus years ago, when someone would come to me with a psychological emotional disorder, they were potentially looking at being put in a padded cell. I would give them evidence through an unraveling, what we call OGs back in the day. It's called an exorcism. All you're doing is refunneling the energy and realigning them so they're aware of their own power as one unit. But most people have got this subjective view of this fear mongering and this ominous double switch. You get the point. The ominous point of this dark entity. And that's part of your own creation. You have to be able to realize you are a creator. And so if you create anger, oh, well, that's Freddy. That's not me. He's an asshole. He's making me feel like shit. And what's happening is no one wants to be accountable, which is where they always fall short and they're never able to create. And so a lot of my kids, they're, between 1 and 12. So they're part of that alpha generation. They need a wet nurse. It's like, listen, son, it's 5 a.m. Go outside without your shirt on and run around for an hour or two. What are you talking about, Dad? It's freezing. You will never feel into your physical body and understand the power that you have if you don't feel resistance. It's like, if you don't use it, you lose it, ladies and gentlemen. And this is the fundamental issue that people are having to contend with today. Just a small note, I didn't want to interrupt. Maybe it's too much of the oolong, I think.
And I wanted to wrap up with just by saying that the good news is that you really can't bring into your experience something that is not meant for you to experience. I mean, there are limits to what manifestation can do and what you can bring into your awareness, because otherwise it'd be overload and you forget the reason why you came here anyway. There's some things you come here to learn and fix and do. So if it's outside of that parameter, it's not going to happen to you anyway. So the idea of sitting there thinking, well, I shouldn't think about, people coming up with a gun and shooting me. Well, if it's not meant to be part of your experience, it's not going to happen anyway. So don't worry about it. You can only handle so much in this limited vessel called the physical body. Outside of the physical body, anything can happen. That's true. But you're here in a limited world, so accept that you'll have a limited experience, even though it'll be very complex within your lifetime. But if it's not meant to be part of your direct experience to grow the soul, it's not going to come anywhere near you. So don't worry about it. So that's the good news.
That's the headline. Earth is a pain of is a plane of suffering and pain.
Yeah, it's going to hurt.
Well, you see, this is where I wish we had another half an hour or an hour, because I would love to go deep on that, because the contemplation of that is, again, a construct of perception, which is within someone else's journey. So if it's not going to happen, I will concur. If you say it's not going to happen, it doesn't happen. If you say it's going to happen, it will happen. It's simplicity of walk under the ladder. If you believe in good luck is going to find you. If you believe in bad luck, shit's going to find you as quick as a fly to shit or a moth to a flame. But this has to be validated with self-realization. Yeah. So if you come from biology, psychology, neurology, physiology, you are limited at best. When I give you the inner workings of Taoist alchemy, it's a template for you to blossom in your own belief system to a knowing through self-realization. It ends there and starts there and ends there. It's not about being indoctrinated and Lao Tzu is your new messiah and all these incredible Taoist philosophies now become your very spoken word. No, most of the people I teach alchemy to have no interest in Taoism whatsoever. They're about getting results. They have to, it's like not diluted. And so I agree with you. We must continue this conversation at some point, because it's fascinating what we've acquired through our biological timeline, and the wealth of perception and understanding adds value to other people that are looking for their own answers. And it comes in that wisdom teaching, which I think is fantastic. And I'm very grateful that the universe has brought you back into my life, my dear friend.
Likewise. I know all is meant to be.
Right. And so I'm going to put your
hallucination.
Yeah, well, the reverse hallucination, I like doing that on the average person that's looking for some type of hit. Hypnosis 101 is a real easy way to give someone a reverse hallucination. And I love turning myself into Justin Bieber of all people, and people freak out when they're able to go, what? That's Justin Bieber. And their friends are videotaping them, and they're like, yeah, that's some dude with a beard that looks like he's a retired, MC enforcer. No, this guy is Justin Bieber. Can I get a photo? And their friends are freaking out going, this person is crazy, because in a fraction of a second, you change the frequency and their perception of reality has changed. And so therefore we start on healing. But hypnosis has been put into a limited box because most people that perform hypnosis don't believe it themselves. And it's like 1,000 times over, they're still in this skeptical, cynical, introspective state, and they don't understand that it happens in a fraction of a second. And so, all this kind of stuff continues. But I'm going to put your social sphere and interweb under this podcast. And I want people to go out and read your 9 books. Is it 9 books right now? That's a great number. Is it 9?
I think it's 9 books now. I lose track of this stuff. Yeah, now, like 15 documentaries. I'm working on the 16th right now, actually.
I would say that 9th book is the very evidence of the 2025 that we are living in right now. And if you want to really hit the polymath numerology aspect, 9 is the highest point. Furthermore, is what we lay down within a Taoist path as the construction and the condensing of a diamond of perfection. And 9 can be either 1 or 0. Why don't you take that away and find your local polymath, and he can give you a very defined answer to what that really means. But Taoists have been using it for thousands of years. Yeah. And most people are like, what the hell are you talking about? How can 9 be 1 or 0? That means you're all things and nothing at the same time. Okay. And it constantly unravels back to the same fundamental stuff. And I always ask people, I'm almost positive, but I'm going to ask you, do you believe you were a Taoist in the past life? Because these things keep presenting themselves over and over and over again. And I love it. And it's all in all indigenous practices. In one way, shape, or form, we're going to see evidence of this. And eventually, we're slow learners. At some point, humanity is going to come up to the plate. The superhuman juice of the superhuman condition of being a human on planet Earth is that access to the sentience, and the superpower is empathy, but you must find that.
Exactly.
So with that, I want to thank you, my dear brother, for sharing with me today. It's been fantastic. Any closing words for the audience that you'd like to share with them?
I think I've said it all, and I have to be on another podcast in 2 minutes, so that's why I have to hurry.
Exactly. Now he's going to say,
I have a time constraint.
He'll say Elvis has left the building. So, furthermore, thank you. Thank the universe for bringing you into my life. Thank the audience for sparing their time with me. That's an interesting one. What a faux pas. I am your humble servant and seafood Taoist master, San Qing, and I'll see you in the next one, guys.